Happy Monday morning, all. This is the Daybreak Fantasy Football News Show with your host, Jim Day. It is Monday, June 10th. Not a lot of news out there, but we'll hit on a couple of the big topics right away. One of the best is that Cam Newton has been cleared to throw in minicamp. That's a great sign. We need to see him get on the field, throw that ball around. He's got a great group of weapons around him this year. If he can get healthy and stay on that field, we're going to see his ADP rise. Currently, he's coming off the board at the FFWC best ball leagues at around the 13th quarterback drafted. If he can get into camp and throw the ball with no injuries, further injuries to that shoulder, then we'll see that skyrocket. We'll see that ADP come jumping up. So if you're drafting now, now's the time to grab him because in a month, once he's on that field, those numbers are going to come up, and we're going to start to see him get drafted back into that top 5, 6 quarterbacks in most places just because of how good he is and the weaponry around him. So don't sleep on Cam Newton this year. If he's fully healthy and fully out there, he's going to be a steal at his current ADP. Again, more not so, not a ton of news, but Daniel Jones played very well in OTAs from all the reports. He seemed to be picking up the offense pretty well. A lot of people felt that he outplayed Eli in the OTAs and already screaming for him to start the season. Folks, that's not going to happen. Eli's going to be the starter. At some point, they probably will make the transition to Jones just because they need to see what they got from him. But don't expect it to be right out of the gate. Probably wouldn't be till halfway through the season at least. And that's only if Eli isn't playing well. If Eli is playing well and this offense is playing well, then that change may not come until either later in the season or maybe not until 2020. Remember that, Dave Gettleman did say once he drafted Jones that he could sit for 3 years behind Eli. I don't quite believe that to be the case, but who knows? Weirder things have happened, especially when Dave Gettleman is in charge. Here's a bit of news that really isn't huge news, but something I like. Albert Wilson, who hasn't really participated in any of the OTAs so far, still coming back from an injury he suffered last year, seems to be looking to be ready for week one. Oh, excuse me. Looking to be ready for week one. And, this is a guy I like. He's, super deep. You don't have to draft him early. You don't have to really invest any draft capital in him, but he's a guy that could surprise in this Miami team. New coaches, new quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how preseason works and how he fits into their scheme. But don't sleep on Wilson. He could definitely be a steal this year. Lastly, again, not a big news day, but I do want to touch on the news we heard of Tyreek Hill last week, where the police investigators are not going to press charges against him, and immediately fantasy owners started rejoicing because Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network said that he could be in training camp. I don't believe that. I just don't see that happening. Goodell is going to step in at some point and do something here. If Kansas City tries to bring him into training camp, there's a very good possibility that Goodell puts him on the commissioner's exempt list, so he can't do anything. The NFL has already come out and said they're not even going to start their investigation until Child Protective Services does theirs. And that's a smart move. Child Protective Services needs to protect a child, and they have him in custody, and they're doing that, and that's great. But other than that, once they have the kids safe, they don't really rush to do anything. So if the NFL isn't even going to start their investigation until Child Protective Services has finished theirs, we could be looking at a very elongated wait for Tyreek Hill and then a suspension. So he could start the season on the commissioner's exempt list, go through whatever he goes through with Child Protective Services. The NFL can then step in and then decide that they want to put, a suspension on him, which I have to imagine they will. They don't need a criminal investigation or, even an arrest to be able to punish or suspend a player if they think there's been something bad here. And look, the prosecutor had already said, look, something happened here. We just don't know who did it. So based on that alone, you're looking at a suspension for Hill, whether it be 2 games, 4 games, 8 games. We just don't have any clue. The one positive you could possibly take from this is that he's still with the Kansas City Chiefs. They haven't dumped him yet. So obviously, there's not enough to really fly on that, but that doesn't matter to Goodell. The one thing you'll always hear me rant about is Goodell and his punishments are so all over the board that you never know what he's going to do. There's no clear, concise method to his madness. It's just each individual case gets its own brand of justice depending on who the player is. And that's just a bad way to do business, but unfortunately, that's how Goodell does business. So everybody in the fantasy community, when they heard that the prosecutor wasn't pressing charges, and all of a sudden, Tyreek Hill started shooting up draft boards again, people started cooling off on Nicole Hardman, and I even saw some, trades in dynasties where people were going after Hill, trying to get rid of Nicole Hardman. Look, there's a good chance that Hill doesn't play much this year. There's also a good chance that he comes back in 2020 with the Chiefs and is their big guy again. So in dynasty leagues, don't overreact one way or the other. If you try to sell Hill now, you probably won't get the value for him that you should. And if you're trying to buy, maybe you can get him cheap. So might be a good time to look into that. Just don't expect a lot from him in 2019. Goodell has his hands in the pot. And because Goodell has his hands in the pot, it's always a tricky situation trying to figure that out. Plus, when you add in McCole Hardman, I'm not sure he's ready to take that Tyreek Hill role on, even if he gets that chance. Don't be surprised if one of the other receivers on Kansas City steps in. Demarcus Robinson is a guy that I think has a good chance to take that role. Sammy Watkins could have a breakout year if he can stay healthy, but that has always been the rub with Sammy Watkins. Can he stay healthy? We'll have to wait and see. And again, folks, not a lot of news here, and we're going to cut it off short. It is a very slow day, but we will see you tomorrow. Don't forget, this is the Daybreak Fantasy Football News Show. I am Jim Day. We are a proud member of the Full-Time Fantasy Podcast Network, who are now 16 podcasts strong and continuing to grow. So make sure you watch out for us. You can follow us on Twitter using the hashtag FTFPodNet. FTFPODNET. Thank you, folks. We're out. We'll see you tomorrow.